EssayShark helps people to learn more about well-known books via its podcasts. It's time to travel to ancient Greece by listening to this podcast about Oedipus Rex by Sophocles. First, let's discuss the connection between the tragedy and the original myth. There is not much difference between myth and tragedy. The difference is that the retelling is Sophocles' interpretation of Oedipus, his perception of this hero. As each reader focuses on different features of the story's character, Sophocles focuses on slightly different characteristics of the same Oedipus. Not all people understand that the essence of the myth is not in the superficial eventfulness but in the character's psychology. Readers can discover an inseparable part of myths with archetypes and other psychological attributes to fill the gaps. The Oedipus complex is familiar to everyone today. Therefore, it is essential to look at the history of its occurrence, the prerequisites, and possibly lost extra meanings. Since Oedipus is a parasite who committed incest with his mother, who unconsciously desired her, feeling competition, and therefore destroyed the rival, many readers expect the myth to be a little closer to this information. However, Oedipus did not even know that he had become a murderer and committed incest since he considered other people his parents. His wife was not a relative, but the one who was killed simply by a boar who prevented him from continuing his path. Here, the difference between the myth and the tragedy of Sophocles arises. As soon as Oedipus learns this terrible truth in the myth, he dreams of exile and hurries it. In Sophocles' tragedy, he worries about being desecrated. In myth, he already jumps to punishment, feeling it as the only salvation from shame, trying not to be imbued with it. But, in the tragedy, he allows himself to feel in tragedy, sinking to the bottom of shameful filth, living through trauma. Of course, Sophocles' view is more correct than a psychotherapeutic point of view. Still, it is more accurate to look at the prototype, the source code, and the original version, but not at someone else's interpretation, even if it is a decent representative of humanity. The original source is more accurate, which shows Oedipus's leap from grief for the people to shame. This shame is complemented by guilt, which makes him run away without looking back. Oedipus doesn't delve into the thought about the upside down of life, which turns out to be completely different from what it was taken for. It is in this case that history becomes an impetus for healing. Sophocles' version, instead, is an example of an attempt to undergo self-healing, individual meaningfulness. Let's continue with the central theme of Oedipus Rex, the theme of fate. The theme of fate is the main one in all Greek dramas. And Sophocles managed to create the most influential work that reveals this topic incredibly profoundly, which has become a recognized classic not only of ancient but also of world literature. In his Poetics, even Aristotle proposed considering the play of Sophocles as an ideal tragic work. The principle of humanistic art, based on the Judeo-Christian tradition, proclaims the responsibility of a person for everything that happens to them in this life. The concepts of good and evil are separated, and their presence in a person's life is fixed, depending on their choice, in other words, goodness and sinfulness. Sophocles was brought up in a different tradition so that he can raise the question of the predestination of human destiny. What is predetermined by the gods will inevitably come true, and it is not in the power of a person to resist the higher will. But man is a hostage to the will of the gods, and their predetermination does not relieve a man of responsibility for those actions that they did not want to do but did. Doesn't this remind you of the notorious original sin of Christianity, when a child coming into this world is already sinful, so to speak, the karma of ancestors? The Greek divine pantheon, which sentenced Oedipus to such a fate, also had some reason. If we think about it, not only Oedipus was punished, his entire family was punished. Father Laius, sentenced to be killed by his son; Mother Jocasta, sentenced to become the wife of her son; daughters who will bear the shameful mark of their origin all their lives. The point may be in the ancestors of Oedipus, Agenor and Cadmus, the father and brother of Europe abducted by Zeus. They also tried to resist the omnipotent deity. Oedipus is not indignant at the will of the gods, he meekly accepts his fate and takes upon himself the sentencing and execution of punishment. His sentence is severe. For patricide, exile; for incest, blinding. These punishments in ancient Greece were considered more severe than the death penalty because death puts an end to earthly torments, and these punishments prolong and aggravate them. The representative of the ancient society was much fairer and more honest than many of today's contemporaries. Oedipus took upon himself the will of the gods, and today's people rarely even admit responsibility for their neurasthenia. The predetermination of a person's choice, when it depends on forces uncontrollable by them, has become a tasty morsel for 20th century psychologists and, more precisely, for Freud and his followers. The two most terrible crimes committed by Oedipus, parricide and incest, became the root theme of Freud's discovered Oedipus complex. It is assumed that the boy initially, as the bearer of the same original sin, is mentally afraid of two things, patricide and incest with his mother, but secretly longs for this, which contributes to the development of a neurotic disorder in him. Further, the scheme was extended to girls, and the tragedy of Sophocles again served as a model. The Electra complex appeared in psychology. This scheme was the basis of classical psychoanalysis, so that Oedipus Rex can be considered to some extent the godfather of today's psychoanalysts. The image of Oedipus became one of the archetypes in world literature. Now let's find out the most interesting facts about the tragedy. Oedipus Rex, a classic tragedy written by Sophocles, is one of the most iconic and influential works in Western literature. Here are some interesting facts that you should know about Oedipus Rex. It was written around 429 BC and was first performed as part of a trilogy of tragedies at the city Dionysia festival. Oedipus Rex is the story of a man who unwittingly fulfills a prophecy that he would kill his father and marry his mother, leading to devastating consequences. The term Oedipus complex was coined by Sigmund Freud to describe the idea of an unconscious desire for incestuous relationships. Oedipus Rex is one of the most studied and analyzed literary works, with many adaptations, including Sophocles' Theban plays. In 2019, the Royal National Theatre commissioned a new adaptation of Oedipus Rex, which opened to rave reviews. The play has been translated into many languages over the centuries, although some have yet to be recovered. It is believed that Oedipus Rex was the first play in history to use a deus ex machina as an ending device. In addition to its incredible influence on literature and psychology, Oedipus Rex has inspired numerous musical compositions. The story of Oedipus Rex is often used to help explore the concept of fate versus free will and how our decisions can profoundly impact our lives. The play's themes and characters are still relevant today, as evidenced by its continued popularity. Oedipus Rex is considered one of the greatest tragedies ever written and is a timeless classic that has stood the test of time. Overall, Oedipus Rex is a powerful work of literature that fascinates and inspires people from all walks of life. Its themes of fate, destiny, and free will still resonate with readers today. Whether you read it for pleasure or to gain a deeper understanding of the human condition, Oedipus Rex is essential for any fan of the classics. The tragedy and its themes remain incredibly relevant today, making it an essential work in literature and psychology. It has been adapted into many different forms, from plays to musicals to films, and will continue to be studied and interpreted for generations to come. Oedipus Rex is an essential work of literature that has inspired readers and thinkers since it was first written. Its timeless themes of fate versus free will, power, and responsibility are as relevant today as they were in the past. We share many exciting posts on our social media accounts. Also, check out other podcasts about famous books.